A bone-chilling gust of wind howled through White Pine Valley, carrying with it an ancient warning that something was terribly wrong. The majestic Blackrock Mountains of Montana, usually steadfast against nature's fury, seemed to shudder as temperatures plummeted to a historic low of 35 degrees C. This wasn't just another winter storm. It was nature's judgment day, and caught in its merciless grip was a mother bear facing an impossible choice. The pristine wilderness of Shadow Pine Forest had never witnessed such brutal conditions. Crystals of ice hung suspended in the air, transforming each breath into a cloud of frozen diamonds. Against this unforgiving backdrop, Emma, a remarkable black bear known throughout the Pinecrest Wildlife Research community, fought against time itself. Her 3 cubs, Storm, River, and Little Pine, huddled against her massive frame, their usually resilient winter coats proving woefully inadequate against this unprecedented cold. Emma wasn't just any mother bear. For 7 years, she had roamed these mountains, earning a reputation among researchers for her exceptional problem-solving abilities. She had survived encounters with larger predators, found food in the harshest conditions, and raised 2 previous litters to adulthood. But nothing in her experience had prepared her for this night. The early December ice storm had caught the entire region off guard, freezing even the thermal springs that had flowed continuously. For decades, her usual denning area in Hidden Valley had become a death trap. The recent geological disturbance had filled their carefully prepared winter shelter with debris, leaving them exposed to elements that grew more hostile by the minute. The cubs, especially Little Pine, were showing dangerous signs of hypothermia. Their movements, once playful and energetic, had become sluggish and weak. Emma's maternal instinct screamed that without immediate shelter, her youngest wouldn't survive the night. Through the curtain of swirling snow, an unfamiliar scent caught Emma's attention. It wasn't the usual forest fragrance of pine and earth, but something different, something that in normal circumstances would send her and her cubs retreating deep into the wilderness. It was the scent of human presence, carried on the wind, from a structure she had always kept her distance from, the solar-powered research station that sat at the edge of her territory. The station belonged to Michael Anderson, though the local wildlife community knew him simply as Mike. At 58, the former park ranger had traded his uniform for a quieter life of wildlife research, maintaining his solitary observation post at the frontier between civilization and wilderness. His cabin, unlike the other research stations in the area, was special. It stood as a silent guardian, watching over the delicate balance between human curiosity and wild freedom. That night, Mike sat at his monitoring station, reviewing footage from his wildlife cameras. The screens showed the devastating impact of the storm, animals seeking shelter, thermal readings dropping to dangerous levels, and the usually flowing Crystal Creek transformed into a frozen ribbon cutting through the landscape. Something about this night felt different, an unease that kept him alert despite the late hour. Emma's decision came when Pine collapsed into the snow, his tiny body almost still. With her stronger cubs, Storm and River, pressing against her legs for warmth, she made a choice that would challenge everything she knew about survival. The mother bear turned toward the scent of human presence, each step carrying her closer to the one thing she had spent her life avoiding. The security lights of Mike's station suddenly illuminated the approaching family, their desperate state revealed in harsh clarity. Ice clung to their fur like cruel armor, and their exhaled breath formed frozen halos around their heads. Emma's massive frame appeared almost ghost-like in the artificial light, her dark eyes reflecting an intelligence that transcended wild instinct. Inside the station, Mike's years of experience taught him that something extraordinary was unfolding. Through his thermal cameras, he watched the family's approach, their body temperatures registering dangerously low on his monitors. This wasn't a bear seeking food or showing aggression. This was something he had never witnessed in all his years of wildlife observation. Emma reached the station's outer deck, her powerful form casting long shadows in the security lights. Pine lay motionless in the snow, while Storm and River huddled together, their small bodies trembling violently. The mother bear's eyes met Mike's through the reinforced windows, and in that moment, something profound passed between them. A desperate plea from one parent to another. Mike's hand hovered over the emergency protocols panel. Every safety regulation, every wildlife management guideline screamed against what he was considering. But as he watched Emma gently nudge her weakest cub, trying to shelter it from the killing cold, he recognized that this night called for something beyond standard procedures. The next few moments would either mark an extraordinary chapter in human-wildlife interaction or end in tragedy. Mike knew that his next decision would challenge everything he understood about the boundaries between wild and tame, between natural law and human compassion. As Emma waited on his deck, her cubs' lives hanging by a thread, the howling wind seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what choice humanity would make in this moment of truth. Don't miss what happens next in this remarkable encounter between wilderness and compassion. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell to be part of more extraordinary wildlife stories that remind us of the incredible bonds possible between humans and animals. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts on Emma's brave decision, and stay tuned for weekly updates featuring amazing tales of survival, trust, and the unbreakable spirit of motherly love. Mike's weathered hands moved with practiced precision across his monitoring equipment, the screens casting a blue glow across his face as he assessed the situation. The thermal imaging showed the bear's core temperatures dropping at an alarming rate. Little Pine's readings barely registered. A faint flicker of warmth that seemed to fade with each passing second. The research station's sensors recorded the external temperature still plunging, now reaching 37 degrees C, breaking all previous records in White Pine Valley's documented history. Through the reinforced windows, Emma's massive form remained steady, despite the brutal wind. Her fur, usually a glossy black, was now encrusted with ice that sparkled ominously under the security lights. The mother bear's behavior defied everything Mike had learned in his 30 years of wildlife research. She made no aggressive displays, no threatening movements. Instead, she maintained a peculiar stillness, her eyes fixed on Mike with an intelligence that made him question everything he thought he knew about these creatures. The larger cubs, Storm and River, pressed against their mother's legs, their small bodies shivering violently. Storm, the strongest of the three, occasionally nudged Pine's motionless form as if trying to rouse its sibling. The sight stirred something deep in Mike's memory, a reminder of his own past, of choices made and paths not taken. 20 years ago, he had faced another impossible decision in these mountains, one that had led him to abandon his promising career as head ranger and retreat to this solitary research post. Emma's breath came in white puffs, creating momentary clouds that froze instantly in the Arctic air. Her eyes never left Mike as she gently moved Pine closer to the station's outer wall, where a thin trace of warmth leaked through the insulation. The gesture was so deliberate, so carefully executed, that it seemed almost human in its reasoning. Mike found himself reaching for his research journal, his hands trembling slightly as he documented this unprecedented behavior. The station's radio crackled to life, breaking the tense silence. Base to all stations, temperature expected to drop another 5 degrees. All personnel advised to maintain strict wildlife protocols. Repeat, maintain strict wildlife protocols. The voice of Dr. Sarah Chen, lead researcher at Pinecrest Wildlife Research Facility, carried the weight of authority, but also a note of concern that Mike had rarely heard before. Mike's gaze drifted to the wall of photographs that chronicled his years in White Pine Valley. Among them was a series of images tracking Emma's growth from a young bear to the mature mother she had become. He had photographed her first tentative steps into motherhood with her previous litter, documented her exceptional fishing techniques at Crystal Creek, and marveled at her ability to avoid the conflicts that often arose between wildlife and the region's expanding human presence. The wind howled louder, rattling the station's solar panels and driving sheets of snow against the windows. The security system's proximity alerts flashed repeatedly as Emma shifted position, trying to shield her cubs from the worst of the gale. Mike noticed how she positioned herself to block the wind, her massive body creating a windbreak for her offspring. Even in this desperate situation, her protective instincts remained razor-sharp. Through his thermal imaging equipment, Mike could track the rapid decline in the cubs' body temperatures. The readings confirmed his worst fears. Without immediate intervention, the cubs, especially Pine, would not survive the night. The same equipment showed him something else, something that made his breath catch in his throat. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Emma's own temperature was dropping dangerously low, yet she remained focused entirely on her cubs' survival. Years of research data scrolled through Mike's mind as he watched the scene unfold. He had documented countless incidents of bear behavior, contributed to dozens of scientific papers on Earth-seen intelligence, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for this moment. Emma's actions suggested a level of reasoning that challenged conventional understanding of wildlife behavior. The station's auxiliary power hummed steadily, maintaining the vital warmth that stood between life and death on this merciless night. Mike found himself grateful for his insistence on installing the extra generators, despite the facility's budget constraints. Those same generators now held the potential to save 4 lives if he could find the courage to break every protocol he had helped establish. Movement on one of his security monitors caught his attention. Another bear, one he recognized as Old Thunder, had taken shelter in a shallow cave about a mile south. The veteran male bear's decision to stop traveling in such weather emphasized the severity of the situation. If a battle-hardened survivor like Old Thunder sought immediate shelter, the danger to Emma and her cubs was even greater than Mike had initially assessed. The research station's internal temperature held steady at a comfortable 72 degrees Celsius. The contrast with the external conditions creating a fog on the interior of the windows. Mike wiped a clear patch with his sleeve, maintaining his visual connection with Emma. Her eyes met his through the cleared glass, and he found himself struck again by the depth of awareness in her gaze. In all his years of wildlife observation, he had never seen such a direct, sustained connection with a wild animal. Emma's parental dedication struck a personal chord with Mike. His own choice to forgo a traditional family life in favor of his wildlife research had always weighed heavily on him. Watching this bear risk everything to save her cubs stirred emotions he thought he had long since buried. The parallels between their lives, both choosing solitude in these mountains, both dedicated to their own forms of protection and nurture, seemed suddenly, startlingly clear. The smallest cub, Pine, had stopped shivering, a dangerous sign that hypothermia was setting in. Emma seemed to sense this change in her cub's condition, her movements becoming more urgent as she tried to shield it from the brutal cold. Storm and River, despite their own distress, pressed closer to their sibling, their instinctive response to crisis mirroring the solidarity often observed in more social species. Mike's security systems continued to feed him data about the unfolding situation. Wind speed 45 miles with gusts up to 60, visibility less than 100 feet and deteriorating. Snow accumulation 32 inches and rising. Each measurement painted a clearer picture of the deadly conditions these bears faced. The storm had created a perfect trap, turning the familiar wilderness into an Arctic wasteland that threatened to claim 4 more lives. Through his surveillance network, Mike could see the broader impact of the storm on the valley's wildlife. Herds of elk had abandoned their usual grazing patterns, seeking shelter in the dense pine groves. A mountain lion he had been tracking for months had retreated to a cave system near Thunder Ridge. Even the hardy ravens that usually patrolled the valley had vanished, leaving the sky as empty as the frozen landscape below. Emma's presence at his station represented more than just an animal seeking shelter. It symbolized a moment of evolutionary significance. A wild creature actively seeking human assistance, displaying a level of trust that defied natural instinct. Mike knew that his response to this situation would have implications far beyond this single night. His decision would either reinforce the boundary between human and wild, or open the door to a new understanding of coexistence. As he watched, Emma made another careful adjustment to her position, angling her body to better protect her cubs from the wind while maintaining clear sightlines to both Mike and potential approach routes to the station. Her behavior displayed a tactical awareness that spoke of years of survival experience, combined with an almost supernatural ability to adapt to changing circumstances. The research station's climate controls hummed steadily, maintaining the vital warmth that seemed to mock the desperate scene outside. Mike's hand rested on the emergency protocols manual, its pages filled with regulations and procedures he had helped write. Those same rules now stood as a barrier between life and death for Emma and her cubs. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on him. His life's work in wildlife conservation might require him to stand by and watch as nature took its course. Through the station's audio monitoring system, Mike could hear Emma's soft vocalizations to her cubs, gentle rumbles and subtle grunts that seemed to carry meaning beyond mere animal communication. He had studied bear vocalizations for years, documenting their various calls and sounds, but these quiet utterances spoke of something deeper, something that transcended scientific classification. The thermal imaging continued to paint a grim picture of the cubs' condition. Their core temperatures had dropped well below the safe threshold for young bears. Pine's readings were particularly alarming, showing only intermittent spikes of warmth that suggested its body was making a final effort to generate heat. Without intervention, the next few minutes would determine whether these cubs would become another statistic in the valley's harsh winter mortality rates. Mike's radio crackled again, this time with a different voice. "Anderson, this is Ranger Martinez. We're picking up unusual activity at your location. Do you need assistance?" The concern in the ranger's voice was evident, but Mike knew that any human intervention now would likely do more harm than good. The situation required delicacy and understanding that went beyond standard wildlife management protocols. His response would need to balance truth with protection, both for the bears and for his own position within the research community. As he reached for the radio, Mike's eyes remained fixed on Emma, watching as she demonstrated a level of trust that challenged everything he thought he knew about wildlife behavior. The next few moments would either mark a breakthrough in human-wildlife interaction or result in tragedy that would haunt these mountains for years to come. Storm and River had positioned themselves on either side of Pine, their small bodies pressing close in an instinctive effort to share what little warmth they had left. Emma's eyes never left Mike as she maintained her protective stance, her massive frame providing what shelter she could against the merciless wind. The security lights cast long shadows across the snow-covered deck, creating an otherworldly scene that seemed to exist outside normal rules of wildlife behavior. Mike's thoughts raced through years of research and observation. He had documented countless instances of bear intelligence, compiled data on their problem-solving abilities, and contributed to the scientific understanding of their social behaviors. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for this moment of connection, this bridge between wild and human worlds that was forming on his station's deck. The station's equipment continued to record every detail of the encounter, capturing data that would either validate Mike's next decision or serve as evidence of a tragic miscalculation. The weight of scientific responsibility pressed against the urgency of compassion as he watched Emma make another careful adjustment to shield her cubs from a particularly violent gust of wind. Through the reinforced windows, Mike could see the desperation in Emma's movements, the careful calculation in her eyes as she maintained her position. The mother bear's behavior displayed a level of reasoning that went beyond instinct, suggesting a cognitive process that would challenge current understanding of wildlife intelligence. As the wind howled louder and the temperature continued to drop, Mike knew that the next few moments would define not only the fate of these bears, but possibly the future of human-wildlife interaction in White Pine Valley. The research station's interior lights flickered momentarily as another violent gust battered the solar panels, sending vibrations through the reinforced structure. Mike's monitoring equipment painted a dire picture across multiple screens. The external temperature had dropped another 2 degrees, and the wind chill factor made it feel closer to 45 degrees C. The meteorological readings suggested this unprecedented cold snap would maintain its grip on White Pine Valley for at least another 12 hours. Emma's massive form shifted slightly on the deck, her movements calculated and precise, despite her obvious exhaustion. The security cameras captured every detail of her desperate situation: ice crystals forming on her eyelashes, steam rising from her nostrils with each labored breath, her fur crackling with accumulated frost. The mother bear's usual graceful power had been replaced by a rigid determination, every ounce of her energy focused on protecting her cubs from the lethal cold. Through the thermal imaging display, Mike watched the cubs' heat signatures growing fainter. Storm and River still maintained some movement, their small bodies pressed together in a futile attempt to preserve warmth, but Pine's thermal signature had become alarmingly weak. The smallest cub lay almost motionless now, only occasional tremors indicating any sign of life. The monitoring equipment recorded Pine's core temperature approaching critical levels. Without immediate intervention, survival chances dropped to near zero. Emma's behavior continued to defy everything Mike had documented in his decades of research. Her eyes remained locked on him, displaying an awareness that transcended typical wildlife behavior. When Pine's weakening condition prompted a soft whimper, Emma's response revealed a depth of maternal intelligence that challenged conventional understanding. She carefully repositioned the smallest cub closer to the station's exterior wall, where trace heat leaked through the insulation, while maintaining her protective stance against the brutal wind. The station's radio system crackled with increasing frequency as regional wildlife services coordinated their response to the crisis. Reports filtered in from across White Pine Valley: elk herds trapped in snowdrifts, wolves seeking shelter in abandoned mine shafts, even a young mountain lion found frozen near Crystal Creek. Each update reinforced the severity of the situation facing Emma and her cubs. Mike's hand hovered over the radio transmitter, knowing his next report could bring either help or harmful interference. Storm, the strongest of the cubs, attempted to stand but immediately collapsed back into the snow. The security cameras caught every detail of the cub's struggle. Its legs trembling with exhaustion, small puffs of breath instantly crystallizing in the Arctic air. River remained curled tightly against Pine, their black fur dusted white with accumulating snow. The sight stirred something deep in Mike's memory, reminding him of another winter night 20 years ago when another choice had altered the course of his life. The research station's backup generator hummed to life as the solar system struggled against the storm's fury. Mike's eyes darted to the fuel gauge. 12 hours of emergency power remained. The same readout that promised warmth and safety inside the station now seemed to mock the desperate scene unfolding on his deck. Every protocol, every regulation he had helped establish over his career stood in opposition to the choice looming before him. Emma's soft vocalizations carried through the station's external microphones, gentle rumbles and subtle whimpers that spoke of both reassurance and desperation. Mike had spent years studying bear communications, documenting their various calls and signals, but these sounds carried a meaning that transcended scientific classification. They were the universal language of a mother facing the possible loss of her children. The wind shifted suddenly, driving a new wave of snow and ice across the deck. Emma immediately adjusted her position, using her massive body to shield her cubs from the onslaught. The security cameras captured her grimace as the frigid gust penetrated her fur, but she maintained her protective stance without hesitation. Her dedication stood in stark contrast to the merciless environment that threatened to claim 4 lives on this unforgiving night. Mike's thermal monitors continued recording the deadly progression of hypothermia in the bear family. Emma's own body temperature had dropped dangerously low, yet she showed no signs of seeking personal comfort. Her entire being remained focused on her cub's survival, even as her own reserves of strength ebbed away. The readings confirmed what Mike could see with his own eyes. Without intervention, neither mother nor cubs would survive another hour. In these conditions, through the station's perimeter cameras, Mike observed other wildlife seeking desperate shelter from the lethal cold. A family of foxes had burrowed into a snowbank near the tree line, their red fur barely visible against the white landscape. Even the hardy ravens that usually patrolled these mountains had vanished, leaving the valley eerily silent, save for the howling wind. The storm had transformed White Pine Valley into an Arctic wasteland that threatened every living thing caught in its grip. Emma's eyes met Mike's through the frosted window, and for a moment time seemed to stand still. In that gaze, he saw something that went beyond the traditional boundaries between human and wild. There was an intelligence there, a desperate plea that spoke directly to his core. His years of scientific observation and careful documentation suddenly felt inadequate in the face of this profound connection. The smallest cub, Pine, hadn't moved for several minutes now. The thermal imaging showed its body temperature approaching a critical threshold, beyond which recovery would become impossible. Emma seemed to sense this dangerous transition. Her movements became more urgent, her attempts to shelter her weakest offspring more desperate. Storm and River pressed closer to their sibling, their own survival instincts temporarily overridden by family bonds. Mike's research logs lay open on his desk, the pages filled with meticulous observations of bear behavior over the years. Many entries documented Emma's exceptional intelligence, her problem-solving abilities, and her careful nature around human structures. But nothing in those records could have predicted this moment. A wild creature actively seeking human assistance, displaying a level of trust that defied natural instinct. The station's security system registered another drop in external temperature. The digital readout now showed 42 degrees, with wind chill pushing it beyond anything recorded in the valley's history. Ice had begun forming on the interior of the station's windows, despite the heating system working at maximum capacity. The same brutal cold that threatened the bears had transformed the research station's windows into sheets of frosted glass, creating an otherworldly barrier between two worlds. Through gaps in the growing frost, Mike watched Emma make another careful adjustment to her position. Her movements, though weakened by cold and exhaustion, retained a deliberate precision that spoke of her extraordinary intelligence. She maintained clear sightlines to both the station entrance and potential escape routes, while keeping her cubs as protected as possible from the lethal wind. The research station's climate control systems struggled against the extraordinary. A cold their hum growing louder as they fought to maintain a livable temperature inside. That same warmth now seemed to mock the desperate scene unfolding just beyond the reinforced walls. Each minute that passed drove the temperature lower, pushing the bears closer to a point of no return. Emma's breath came in shorter bursts now, each exhale creating a cloud of ice crystals that hung momentarily in the air before being whipped away by the wind. The security cameras caught every detail of her deteriorating condition. The ice forming on her fur, the slight tremors in her muscles, the growing desperation in her eyes. Yet still she maintained her protective stance, her massive body shielding her cubs from the worst of the storm. The station's radio crackled again, this time with an automated weather alert. The storm system showed no signs of weakening, with another pressure front approaching from the north that promised even lower temperatures. Mike's screens displayed the approaching weather pattern in vivid detail, a massive blue mass of Arctic air that would turn White Pine Valley into a death trap for any creature caught without shelter. Through the station's audio monitoring system, Mike detected a change in Emma's vocalizations. The reassuring rumbles she had been using to comfort her cubs had grown weaker, taking on a different quality that spoke of increasing desperation. He had documented bear vocalizations for years, but these sounds carried a meaning that transcended scientific classification. They were the sounds of a mother watching her children slip away. The thermal imaging continued its merciless documentation of the cubs' declining condition. Storm and River's heat signatures had weakened significantly, while Pine's barely registered on the scale. The equipment's clinical display of body temperatures and core readings seemed inadequate to capture the emotional weight of the unfolding tragedy. These weren't just data points on a screen. They were lives hanging in the balance. Mike's gaze drifted to the wall of photographs that chronicled his years in White Pine Valley. Among them were several images of Emma, her first appearance in the valley as a young bear, her exceptional fishing techniques at Crystal Creek, her careful navigation of the territory's boundaries with human settlements. Each photograph told part of a story that had led to this crucial moment, where the line between wild and tame, between natural law and human compassion, had become impossibly blurred. The station's proximity alerts flashed as Emma shifted position, again trying to find better shelter from a particularly vicious gust of wind. The security lights cast harsh shadows across the snow-covered deck, creating an almost theatrical scene of struggle against impossible odds. The mother bear's determination remained unshaken, even as her own strength visibly ebbed with each passing minute. In the distance, barely audible above the howling wind, a wolf pack's howls echoed through the valley. The sound carried a mournful quality, as if nature itself was lamenting the brutality of this night. Mike's surveillance network showed the wolves had taken shelter in a cave system near Thunder Ridge, their own survival instincts driving them to abandon their usual hunting patterns. The research station's backup generator continued its steady rhythm, maintaining the barrier of warmth that separated Mike from the desperate scene outside. That same warmth now represented either salvation or cruel irony, depending on the choice he would make in the next few moments. Years of scientific training and wildlife management experience warred with basic human compassion as he watched Emma make another futile attempt to warm her weakening cubs. The research station's emergency protocols manual lay open on Mike's desk, its pages dog-eared from years of reference. Section 7. 4. Wildlife in distress outlined clear procedures, none of which accounted for the unprecedented situation unfolding on his deck. The words blurred before his eyes as his mind raced through potential consequences of any action or inaction he might take in the next crucial moments. His hands moved across the control panel with practiced precision, initiating a complete scan of the station's perimeter. The monitoring system painted a comprehensive picture of the crisis, Wind speeds now exceeding 70 miles per hour, visibility reduced to mere feet, and temperature readings that seemed more appropriate for the Arctic than Montana. Each data point reinforced the severity of Emma and her cub's situation. The reinforced windows had accumulated a thick layer of frost, forcing Mike to rely increasingly on his surveillance equipment. Through the thermal cameras, he watched Emma's heat signature growing weaker, her massive body hunched protectively. Over her cubs, the imaging software calculated her core temperature, displaying numbers that flashed red on his screen, a warning that even her substantial mass couldn't protect her from the killing cold much longer. Mike's radio crackled with an incoming transmission from Pinecrest Wildlife Research facility. Anderson Base here. Satellite imaging shows you're at the epicenter of this system. What's your status? Dr. Chen's voice carried both professional concern and personal worry. Mike's finger hovered over the response button, knowing his next words could bring either help or catastrophic interference. The station's external microphones captured a sound that made his blood run cold. A weak, plaintive cry from Pine, barely audible above the howling wind. The smallest cub had stopped shivering, its body lying motionless in the growing blanket of snow. Emma's response was immediate and heartbreaking. She gently nosed her weakest offspring, making soft vocalizations that needed no scientific interpretation to understand. 20 years of wildlife research experience weighted heavily on Mike's shoulders as he observed the scene. His doctoral thesis on ursine intelligence had revolutionized understanding of bear cognition, but nothing in his academic background had prepared him for this moment. The boundary between objective observation and moral imperative had never felt so fragile. The station's auxiliary heating system hummed steadily, maintaining a comfortable temperature that seemed to mock the desperate scene outside. Emergency supplies, including thermal blankets and medical equipment, sat sealed in their storage lockers. Each item represented a potential lifeline, yet using them would violate every protocol he had sworn to uphold. Through the station's audio system, Mike detected subtle changes in Emma's vocalizations. The reassuring rumbles she had been using to comfort her cubs took on a different quality, something between a plea and a prayer. His years of studying bear communications had documented dozens of distinct vocalizations, but this sound belonged to a category beyond scientific classification. Storm and River, the stronger cubs, had stopped their occasional movements, their small bodies now pressed motionless against their sibling. The thermal imaging showed their heat signatures fading like dying embers. Emma's attempts to shelter them grew weaker, her own reserves of strength depleting with each passing minute. The brutal mathematics of survival in the wild had never felt more immediate or cruel. Mike's security feeds showed movement at the forest's edge, a young moose, seeking shelter from the lethal cold. The animal's desperate search for protection highlighted the unprecedented nature of this storm. When even the hardiest creatures of the White Pine Valley fled before the elements, what chance did 3 bear cubs have against nature's fury? The VU research station's backup generator continued its steady rhythm, the sound a constant reminder of the barrier between survival and death. Mike's eyes darted between his monitors, each screen telling part of the story. Meteorological data predicting another 3 hours before any improvement in conditions, thermal readings showing the bear's deteriorating condition, security, feeds documenting what might be their final moments. Emma's eyes found his through a clear patch in the frosted window, and Mike felt the weight of her gaze like a physical force. In that moment, he saw something that transcended the traditional boundaries between observer and subject. The intelligence in those eyes spoke of awareness, of desperate calculation, of a mother's ultimate sacrifice in approaching the one thing she had always feared for the sake of her children. The station's proximity alerts flashed as Emma made Another adjustment to her position, her movements now noticeably slower and less coordinated. The security lights illuminated her fur, which had accumulated so much ice it appeared almost white. Steam no longer rose from her breath, the cold having stolen even that small sign of life's warmth. Mike's research logs contained thousands of hours of observations, hundreds of documented behaviors, and countless insights into bear intelligence. Yet in all those pages, there was nothing to guide him through this moment. Science could document the dropping temperatures, calculate survival probabilities, and measure physiological responses, but it couldn't quantify the moral weight of the decision before him. The wind changed direction suddenly, driving snow and ice horizontally across the deck. Emma's massive frame shuddered under the impact, but she maintained her protective stance over her cubs. The security cameras captured every detail of her struggle. Muscles trembling with exhaustion, ice-encrusted fur offering diminishing protection, each breath becoming more labored than the last. Through the station's external sensors, Mike detected other changes in the environment. The usual night sounds of the valley had gone silent, replaced by the persistent howl of the wind. Even the ravens, those hardy sentinels of the wilderness, had abandoned their perches. Nature itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what choice would be made in these crucial moments. The smallest cub, Pine, hadn't moved for several minutes now. The thermal imaging showed its body temperature approaching a threshold, beyond which revival would become impossible. Emma's response to her cub's condition revealed a depth of understanding that challenged conventional beliefs about animal consciousness. Her attempts to warm the tiny body spoke of awareness, of desperate hope against overwhelming odds. Mike's hand moved to the station's main door control, then hesitated. Years of training and experience had taught him to maintain professional distance, to let nature take its course without human intervention. But as he watched Emma's weakening attempts to protect her cubs, those same years of observation told him he was witnessing something extraordinary. A moment when the traditional boundaries between wild and human needed to be reconsidered. The research station's climate control systems fought against the unprecedented cold, their hum growing louder as they struggled to maintain the barrier between life and death. That same warmth that protected Mike now represented either salvation or cruel irony for the bears outside, depending on what he decided in the next few moments. Emma's breath came in shorter gasps now, each exhale creating less and less vapor in the frozen air. The security cameras documented her deteriorating condition with clinical precision. The slight tremors in her muscles, the ice forming on her fur, the growing desperation in her movements. Yet still, she maintained her position, her maternal instinct overriding even her own survival needs. The station's radio system picked up increased chatter as other research posts reported wildlife casualties across the region. Each transmission added to the weight of Mike's decision, highlighting both the unprecedented nature of the crisis and the potential consequences of his choice. His finger hovered over the transmit button, knowing his next report could change everything. Through the thermal imaging display, Mike watched the cub's heat signatures growing fainter by the minute. Storm and River's occasional movements had become sluggish and uncoordinated, while Pine showed no movement at all. The monitoring equipment recorded their core temperatures approaching critical levels. Without immediate intervention, survival chances dropped to nearly zero. Emma's soft vocalizations carried through the station's external microphones, gentle rumbles and subtle whimpers that spoke of both reassurance and desperation. Mike had spent years studying bear communications, documenting their various calls and signals, but these sounds carried a meaning that transcended scientific classification. They were the universal language of a mother facing the possible loss of her children. The wind shifted again, driving a new wave of snow and ice across the deck. Emma immediately adjusted her position, using her massive body to shield her cubs from the onslaught. The security cameras captured her grimace as the frigid gust penetrated her fur, but she maintained her protective stance without hesitation. Her dedication stood in stark contrast to the merciless environment that threatened to claim 4 lives on this unforgiving night. Mike's fingers moved across the control panel, initiating the station's emergency protocols. Warning lights flashed across his screens as he overrode safety interlocks and disabled automatic wildlife deterrent systems. Each override required his personal authorization code, leaving an indelible record of his decisions in the station's logs. The weight of 30 years of wildlife research experience pressed against him as he typed in the final confirmation. The external thermometers registered another drop in temperature, the digital readout now showing numbers that seemed impossible for White Pine Valley. Frost patterns spread across the reinforced windows like living things, their crystalline fingers obscuring direct vision of the bears. Through the station's cameras, Mike watched Emma's desperate struggle against the elements continue, her massive form now barely distinguishable beneath accumulating snow and ice. The station's ventilation system hummed to life, adjusting to Mike's commands as he reconfigured the building's climate zones. The entry chamber, normally kept at external temperature to prevent wildlife attraction, began to warm. Indicator lights shifted from red to amber as the small space reached temperatures that might sustain life. Every protocol he had helped write warned against this action, yet the sight of Pine's motionless form drove him forward. Through the network of sensors embedded in the station's deck, Mike detected Emma's weakening vital signs. Her heart rate had slowed dangerously, her body temperature dropping despite her substantial mass. The cubs' readings were even more alarming. Their small bodies simply couldn't generate enough heat to combat the brutal cold. Storm and River's movements had become erratic, while Pine showed no movement at all. The research station's main computer chimed with incoming data from the Pinecrest Wildlife Research facility. Satellite imagery revealed the full scope of the Arctic system gripping the region, a massive blue swirl of lethal cold that had transformed the Montana wilderness into something alien and hostile. Dr. Chen's voice crackled through the radio, requesting an immediate status update. Mike's response would have to wait, his attention focused entirely on the scene unfolding on his deck. Emma's eyes remained fixed on Mike through gaps in the frost-covered windows, their intelligence undimmed despite her deteriorating condition. Her breath came in shorter gasps now, each exhale creating less vapor in the frozen air. The security. Cameras captured every detail of her struggle. Muscles trembling with exhaustion, fur encased in ice, each movement becoming more labored than the last. The station's external microphones picked up a sound that made Mike's decision final, a weak whimper from Storm, followed by silence. The stronger cubs had finally succumbed to the cold, their small bodies lying motionless beside Pine. Emma's response was immediate and heartbreaking. She tried to rouse them with gentle nudges, her movements growing more desperate as they failed to respond. Mike's hand moved to the emergency release for the station's outer door. The handle felt cold beneath his fingers, a reminder of the lethal conditions waiting beyond the barrier. Warning messages flashed across his screens, pressure differential alerts, temperature warnings, security protocols, demanding confirmation. Each alert represented another rule about to be broken, another boundary about to be crossed. The research station's power system surged as Mike activated additional heating elements in the entry chamber. Emergency supplies lay ready. Thermal, blankets, warming packs, and medical monitoring equipment he had never imagined using on wild bears. His years of observing wildlife had taught him to maintain distance, to let nature take its course. But nature had never presented him with a choice quite like this. Emma's soft vocalizations carried through the station's audio system. There, meaning clear even without scientific interpretation. These were the sounds of a mother watching her children die, a universal language of desperation that transcended species boundaries. The thermal cameras showed her own heat signature fading, her massive body reaching its limits in the battle against the cold. The wind howled with renewed fury as Mike initiated the door-opening sequence. Warning klaxons sounded throughout the station as the environmental seal prepared to break. His screens filled with emergency protocols and safety warnings, each one representing years of careful wildlife management procedures about to be violated. The moment stretched out, heavy with the weight of consequence. Through the station's perimeter cameras, Mike observed other changes in the wilderness. The storm had driven all wildlife from exposed areas, leaving the valley eerily empty, save for the desperate scene on his deck. Even the hardy ravens that usually patrolled these mountains had vanished, leaving the sky as lifeless as the frozen landscape below. The entry chamber's temperature stabilized at 40 degrees Fahrenheit, the warmest Mike dared make it without risking shock to the bear's systems. Medical knowledge gained from years of wildlife research guided his preparations. Blankets positioned strategically, warming packs ready for activation, monitoring equipment primed to track vital signs. Each item represented hope against overwhelming odds. Emma's attention shifted as the door's mechanism engaged, the sound drawing her remaining strength into a protective stance over her cubs. The security cameras captured her struggle to maintain awareness, to fulfill her maternal duty despite her own desperate condition. Ice fell from her fur as she moved, the crystals shattering on the deck like broken glass. The research station's backup generator hummed steadily, maintaining power to critical systems as Mike diverted energy to the heating elements. His screens displayed a cascade of data: wind speed, temperature readings, barometric pressure, and the bear's fading. Vital signs. Each number told part of a story approaching its climax, one way or another. Mike's hands moved across his control panels with practiced precision, even as his mind raced through possibilities and consequences. The station's cameras documented every aspect of these crucial moments: Emma's weakening struggle, the cubs' motionless forms, the swirling snow that threatened to bury them all. Years of scientific observation were about to give way to direct intervention, crossing a line few researchers had dared approach. The entry chamber's inner door sealed with a soft hiss, creating a controlled environment for what would happen next. Mike's thermal imaging showed the temperature differential between the chamber and the external air, a gradient that could mean the difference between life and death for the bears. Warning lights continued to flash across his screens, each one marking another safety protocol overridden. Emma's attention remained fixed on the outer door as it began to open, her instincts warring between fear and desperate need. The security cameras captured every detail of her response. Muscles tensing despite exhaustion, eyes alert despite the cold's crushing weight. Even in her weakened state, she maintained her protective position over her cubs, ready to defend them with her last breath. The research station's systems registered the pressure change as the outer door opened wider, creating a visible fog where warm and cold air met. Mike watched through his monitors as Emma processed this development, her remarkable intelligence evident in her careful assessment of the situation. Despite her desperate condition, she showed no panic, no aggression, only calculated awareness of a possible chance at survival. Through the station's external sensors, Mike detected subtle changes in Emma's behavior. Her breathing pattern shifted, her stance adjusted, preparing for whatever might come next. The thermal cameras showed her remaining body heat concentrated around her vital organs, her massive frame having spent its resources trying to protect her cubs. Every movement now came at a cost of precious energy. The entry chamber's warm air spilled onto the deck, creating a temporary haven from the lethal cold. Emma's response to this change revealed her extraordinary adaptability. No sudden movements, no retreat, just careful observation as she evaluated this new development. The security cameras documented her assessment, her eyes moving between the open door and her motionless cubs. Mike's screens filled with vital sign data as his monitoring equipment tracked the bear's conditions. Core temperatures, heart rates, respiratory function. Each measurement told part of a story balanced between tragedy and hope. The cubs showed dangerously low readings, their small bodies pushed far beyond normal survival thresholds. Emma's own vital signs weren't much better, though her greater mass had provided some protection against the cold. The research station's warnings continued as Mike prepared for the next phase of his intervention. Each step would take him further from established protocols, deeper into uncharted territory in human-wildlife interaction. His years of study had taught him to maintain professional distance, but those same years had also shown him the remarkable intelligence and adaptability of these creatures. Emma's gaze met Mike's through the surveillance feeds, conveying something beyond simple animal awareness. In that moment of connection, science and instinct merged into understanding. The security cameras captured this extraordinary interaction. A wild creature's conscious decision to trust, a human's choice to help, both driven by forces deeper than reason. Warmth spilled from the entry chamber like a living thing, creating a barrier against the murderous cold. The temperature differential generated swirling eddies of vapor, transforming the research station's deck into an otherworldly landscape. Mike watched through his monitoring systems as Emma processed this change, her remarkable intelligence evident in every subtle movement. The station's floodlights cast harsh shadows across the scene, highlighting the cruel transformation winter had wrought on these magnificent creatures. Emma's fur, normally a glossy black, had become a frozen armor that crackled with each labored breath. The cubs lay motionless, their small bodies almost invisible beneath the accumulating snow and ice. Mike initiated the final safety override. Sequence, his fingers moving across the control panel with deliberate precision. Each command represented another barrier between wild and tame dissolving, another rule of wildlife management cast aside in the face of extraordinary circumstances. The station's computer demanded multiple confirmations, its programming struggling to accept the unprecedented situation. Through the thermal imaging displays, Mike tracked the gradual warming of the deck area nearest the entry chamber. The temperature gradient appeared as bands of color, shifting from deep blue to pale yellow, a visual representation of hope spreading across the frozen landscape. Emma's own heat signature remained dangerously weak, her massive body having spent its resources trying to protect her cubs. The research station's external microphones captured Emma's soft vocalizations as she registered the change in her environment. The sounds carried none of the aggression or fear typically associated with bears in close proximity to humans. Instead, her gentle rumbles spoke of awareness, of careful calculation, of desperate hope tempered by maternal caution. Mike's medical monitoring equipment stood ready, calibrated for the extraordinary task ahead. Years of wildlife research had taught him the delicate balance of bear physiology, but never had he imagined applying that knowledge in such direct intervention. The thermal blankets and warming packs seemed inadequate tools against the profound cold that had nearly claimed 4 lives. Emma's attention shifted between her cubs and the open entry chamber, her intelligence evident in her careful assessment of the situation. The security cameras documented her analytical approach. No sudden movements, no panic, just measured evaluation of this unexpected development. Even in her exhausted state, her protective instincts remained sharp, governing every decision. The station's atmospheric sensors detected another pressure change as the Arctic air mass tightened its grip on White Pine Valley. The wind's howl took on a deeper note, promising even lower temperatures to come. Through his perimeter cameras, Mike observed the strange stillness that had fallen over the wilderness, as if nature itself held its breath to witness what would unfold. Mike's hands moved to the emergency medical supplies, preparing for whatever might come next. The station's protocols had never envisioned using these resources on wild animals, yet here he stood, ready to cross that line. Each item represented another boundary about to be breached, another step into unknown territory in human-wildlife interaction. Emma's breathing had grown more labored, her massive chest rising and falling with decreasing regularity. The thermal imaging showed her core temperature approaching dangerous levels, yet still she maintained her protective stance over her cubs. The security cameras captured every detail of her struggle, muscles trembling with exhaustion, eyes growing heavy, each movement coming at greater cost. The research station's backup generator continued its steady rhythm, maintaining the precious warmth that now represented the only hope for survival. Mike's screens displayed a cascade of data: vital signs, temperature readings, atmospheric conditions, each measurement telling part of a story balanced between tragedy and hope. The cubs showed no measurable vital signs, their small bodies having surrendered to the cold. Through the station's external sensors, Mike detected subtle changes in the storm's intensity. The wind had shifted slightly, driving snow and ice at a new angle across the deck. Emma adjusted her position automatically, her survival instincts remaining sharp despite her deteriorating condition. The security cameras caught her grimace as this movement displaced the ice that had formed on her fur. Mike's medical knowledge, gained from years of wildlife research, screamed warnings about the bear's condition. Hypothermia had progressed, far beyond the initial stages, pushing their bodies to the very limits of survival. The monitoring equipment captured every devastating detail: slowed heart rates, minimal respiratory function, dangerously low core temperatures. The entry chamber's warmth continued to spread across the deck, creating a small zone of survivable temperatures in the Arctic wasteland. Emma's response to this change revealed her extraordinary adaptability. No sudden retreat, no aggressive defense, just careful observation as she evaluated this potential salvation. The security cameras documented her assessment, her eyes moving between the open door and her motionless cubs. Mike's screens filled with warning messages as he prepared for direct intervention. Each alert represented another protocol about to be violated, another fundamental rule of wildlife management about to be broken. Yet as he watched Emma's weakening struggle to protect her cubs, those same rules seemed inadequate, even cruel in the face of such extraordinary circumstances. The research station's ventilation system adjusted automatically as Mike reconfigured the environmental controls. Warm air flowed in carefully calculated patterns, creating a gradient that might allow the bears' bodies to warm gradually, avoiding the shock of sudden temperature change. Each adjustment represented years of scientific knowledge being applied, in ways never intended by its creators. Emma's gaze remained fixed on Mike through the surveillance feeds, conveying something beyond simple animal awareness. The security cameras captured this remarkable interaction: a wild creature's conscious choice to trust, a human's decision to help, both driven by forces deeper than instinct or reason. In her eyes, Mike saw intelligence that challenged everything. He thought he knew about wildlife behavior. The station's perimeter sensors detected movement at the forest's edge, other creatures drawn by the promise of warmth. Mike's screens showed deer and elk emerging from their inadequate shelter, their own survival instincts warring with fear of human presence. The unprecedented cold had rewritten the rules of the wilderness, forcing new choices on all its inhabitants. Through the thermal imaging display, Mike watched the temperature gradient expand across the deck. The warming effect appeared as a slow tide of color, changing from deadly blue to cautious yellow, each degree of improvement representing another chance at survival. Emma's own heat signature remained frighteningly weak, her massive body having spent its resources trying to protect her cubs. The research station's medical monitoring equipment stood ready, calibrated for an unprecedented task. Mike's hands moved across the supplies with practiced efficiency, preparing for whatever might come next. Each item represented another step into unknown territory, another boundary about to be crossed in the name of survival. Emma's attention shifted as the warmth reached her cubs, their small bodies still showing no response to the environmental change. The security cameras captured her gentle attempts to rouse them, her movements growing more urgent as they remained motionless. The thermal imaging showed no improvement in their core temperatures, time running out for any chance of revival. Mike's screens continued to display vital sign data, each measurement more alarming than the last. The cubs' physiological readings barely registered, their small bodies pushed far beyond normal survival thresholds. Emma's own vital signs showed dangerous deterioration, though her greater mass had provided some protection against the lethal cold. The research station's warning systems continued their protest as Mike prepared for the next phase of intervention. Each step would take him further from established protocols, deeper into uncharted territory in human-wildlife interaction. His years of study had taught him to maintain professional distance, but those same years had also shown him the remarkable intelligence and adaptability of these creatures. Through the station's external microphones, Mike detected changes in Emma's vocalizations. Her soft rumbles took on a different quality, something between pleading and permission, as if she understood that accepting human help was their only chance for survival. The security cameras documented this extraordinary moment, capturing a level of trust that defied conventional understanding of wildlife behavior. The moment of truth arrived with the gentle hiss of the entry chamber's inner seal releasing. Mike stepped into the airlock, his movements deliberately slow and measured. The environmental controls adjusted automatically, creating a stable temperature gradient between the station's warmth and the lethal cold outside. His breath clouded in the intermediate space as his body adjusted to the temperature change. Medical supplies filled his arms, thermal blankets designed for extreme conditions, chemical warming packs developed for high-altitude rescue, and portable monitoring equipment calibrated for large mammal vital signs. Each item represented a lifeline, a piece of human technology about to be deployed in ways their designers never imagined. The weight of the supplies felt insignificant compared to the weight of the decision he had made. The outer door opened with excruciating slowness, its mechanism fighting against the accumulated ice. Through the widening gap, Mike observed Emma's reaction. The massive bear remained perfectly still, her eyes tracking his every movement with an intelligence that seemed to transcend species barriers. Even in her weakened state, her presence commanded respect, a reminder that she remained a wild creature despite her desperate circumstance. Warmed air from the entry chamber swirled around Mike's feet as he took his first step onto the deck. The temperature differential created ghostly patterns in the air, transforming the simple act of walking into something otherworldly. His boots crunched through the accumulated ice, each step carefully placed to avoid startling the bears. The distance between the doorway and Emma's position seemed to stretch endlessly. The floodlights cast harsh shadows across the scene, highlighting the cruel transformation winter had wrought on these magnificent creatures. Up close, the devastation was even more apparent. Ice crystals had formed between the individual hairs of Emma's fur, creating a brittle armor that crackled with each labored breath. The cubs lay motionless, their small bodies almost indistinguishable from the surrounding snow. Mike's medical training fought against his instincts as he drew closer to the bear family. Every principle of wildlife management warned against approaching injured or distressed animals, Yet those same principles seemed woefully inadequate in the face of this extraordinary situation. His movements remained slow and telegraphed, allowing Emma to process each advance. The portable monitoring equipment in his hands came to life, detecting the bear's vital signs from a short distance. The readings confirmed his worst fears. Core temperatures far below sustainable levels, heartbeats weak and irregular, respiratory functions minimal. The cubs showed barely detectable life signs, their small bodies having surrendered almost completely to the cold. Emma's eyes never left Mike as he approached, their dark depths holding something beyond animal awareness. Her massive head turned slightly, following his movement, but she made no aggressive display. The trust implicit in her behavior defied everything Mike had learned about bear psychology. Even in her weakened state, she could have easily defended her cubs with lethal force. The first thermal blanket unfurled in Mike's hands, its metallic surface reflecting the floodlights in sharp flashes. Emma watched this new development with evident interest, her intelligence showing in her careful assessment of the unknown object. Her cubs remained motionless as Mike took another step forward, now close enough to detect the faint steam still rising from their frozen fur. Time seemed to slow as Mike crossed the final distance separating him from the bears. Emma's breath came in shallow gasps, each exhale creating less vapor in the frigid air. At this range, he could see the fine tremors running through her massive frame, evidence of her body's desperate fight against the cold. Yet still, she maintained her protective stance, maternal instinct overriding even her own survival needs. The chemical warming packs activated with sharp cracks that seemed unnaturally loud in the storm-muffled night. Emma's ears twitched at the sound, but she showed no sign of panic or aggression. Her trust in this moment represented something unprecedented in Mike's experience with wildlife. Years of research had taught him that bears were intelligent, but this level of reasoning challenged all conventional understanding. Mike's hands shook slightly as he prepared to make first contact. The thermal blanket rustled in the wind as he held it out, allowing Emma to inspect this strange new element in her world. Her nostrils flared slightly, taking in the unfamiliar scent of human technology. The trust implicit in this moment felt almost sacred, a bridge being built between two worlds. The first touch of the thermal blanket against Pine's frozen fur marked a moment of no return. Emma watched intently as Mike gently wrapped her smallest cub, his movements slow and precise. The artificial warmth began its work immediately, the chemical heating packs providing vital heat to the cub's core. Through his monitoring equipment, Mike detected the first faint strengthening of Pine's heartbeat. Storm and River received similar treatment, their bodies carefully enveloped in thermal protection. Emma's attention remained divided between watching Mike's actions and maintaining awareness of their surroundings. Her protective instincts never wavered, even as she allowed this unprecedented human intervention. The trust she displayed spoke of reasoning that went far beyond simple animal intelligence. The portable monitoring equipment continued to feed data to Mike's tablets, tracking every subtle change in the cub's condition. The first signs of improvement appeared: slight increases in core temperature, strengthening heartbeats, more regular breathing patterns. Each positive indicator represented a small victory in the battle against the cold, a step back from the brink of tragedy. Emma's own condition demanded attention as Mike prepared another set of thermal blankets. Her massive body had spent its resources trying to protect her cubs, leaving her dangerously vulnerable to the killing cold. The trust she had shown in allowing him to help her cubs now faced a greater test, accepting help for herself. The moment stretched out, heavy with potential consequences. The wind's howl took on a different note as Mike worked, its fury seeming to protest this intervention in natural law. Ice crystals drove horizontally across the deck, adding urgency to each movement. The storm had transformed White Pine Valley, into something alien and hostile, a landscape where survival depended on crossing boundaries that had always seemed absolute. Through his medical equipment, Mike tracked Emma's vital signs as he prepared to extend help to her. The readings painted a grim picture: severely depressed body temperature, weakening heart rate, declining respiratory function. Her massive size, usually an advantage in cold weather, had worked against her as she spent her resources trying to warm her cubs. The situation required immediate intervention. Mike's hands moved with careful precision as he approached Emma with the thermal blanket. Her eyes followed his movement, showing no sign of fear or aggression despite her vulnerable state. The trust she displayed in this moment represented something beyond scientific explanation, a conscious choice to accept help from the very species she had always avoided. The floodlights caught the ice crystals in Emma's fur, making them sparkle like diamonds as Mike drew closer. Her breath came in shorter gasps now, each exhale creating less vapor in the frozen air. The monitoring equipment showed her core temperature continuing to drop, pushing dangerous close to levels from which recovery would be impossible. Time pressed against them like a physical force. The first touch of the thermal blanket against Emma's frozen fur marked another breakthrough in human-wildlife interaction. She remained perfectly still as Mike worked, allowing him to position the protective covering across her massive shoulders. The chemical warming packs activated with sharp cracks, beginning their vital work of fighting back the killing cold. Through his monitoring equipment, Mike tracked the gradual improvement in Emma's vital signs as the thermal protection took effect. Her heart rate stabilized slightly, her breathing became more regular, and her core temperature began a slow climb back towards sustainable levels. Each positive indicator represented another small victory in the battle for survival. The wind continued its assault on the research station, driving snow and ice across the deck with renewed fury. Mike worked steadily, his movements economical and precise as he secured additional thermal blankets around Emma's body. The trust she showed in accepting this help challenged everything he thought he knew about wildlife behavior. Emma's eyes remained fixed on Mike as he worked, their dark depths holding something that transcended simple animal awareness. The floodlights caught occasional glints of intelligence in her gaze, moments of connection that defied scientific explanation. Her decision to trust, to accept human intervention, represented something profound in the relationship between wild and tame. The portable monitoring equipment continued feeding data to Mike's tablets, tracking every subtle change in the bear's condition. The cubs showed the first signs of genuine improvement, strengthening vital signs, more regular breathing patterns, slight movements that suggested returning consciousness. Each positive indicator represented hope against overwhelming odds. The research station's entry chamber had transformed into an impromptu wildlife hospital, its environment carefully controlled to support the bear's gradual warming. Mike's monitoring equipment tracked every subtle change in their condition, each positive reading building hope against the brutal cold that still raged outside. The thermal blankets shimmered under the harsh lighting, their metallic surfaces reflecting the dedication of human technology against nature's fury. Pine, the smallest cub, stirred faintly beneath its protective covering. The movement, barely perceptible, triggered an immediate response from Emma. Her massive head turned toward her weakest offspring, nostrils flaring as she detected signs of returning life. The monitoring equipment confirmed what maternal instinct had already sensed. Pine's core temperature had risen just enough to allow the first tentative steps toward recovery. Mike worked methodically, adjusting the chemical warming packs to maintain optimal heat distribution. His hands moved with practiced precision, each gesture carefully telegraphed to avoid startling his unprecedented patience. Emma watched his every movement, her dark eyes reflecting an intelligence that continued to challenge conventional understanding of wildlife behavior. The trust she displayed remained extraordinary, a bridge between worlds built by desperate circumstance. Storm and river showed stronger signs of improvement, their larger bodies responding more quickly to the emergency treatment. Small tremors ran through their frames as circulation gradually returned to frozen limbs. The monitoring equipment tracked these changes in detail, strengthening heartbeats, more regular breathing patterns, subtle shifts that suggested growing awareness. Each positive indicator represented another step back from the brink. Wind's howl penetrated even the station's reinforced walls, a constant reminder of the lethal conditions still gripping White Pine Valley. Through the observation windows, swirling snow created ghostly patterns in the floodlight's glare. The storm showed no signs of relenting, its Arctic fury transforming the familiar wilderness into an alien landscape hostile to all life. Emma's own condition showed gradual improvement as the thermal protection did its work. Her massive body, initially rigid with cold, began to show signs of relaxing. The monitoring equipment tracked the slow rise in her core temperature, each degree gained representing another victory in the battle for survival. Yet she remained alert, her maternal instincts undiminished by her own discomfort. The portable medical devices continued feeding data to Mike's tablets, creating a digital record of this unprecedented event. Each measurement, each reading, told part of a story that would challenge scientific understanding of wildlife behavior. The trust Emma displayed, her apparent comprehension of human assistance, suggested levels of reasoning far beyond conventional beliefs about bear intelligence. Pine's first clear movement drew everyone's attention. The smallest cub shifted beneath, its thermal blanket emitting a weak sound that triggered an immediate response from Emma. Her soft rumble of acknowledgement carried notes of relief and encouragement, a universal language of maternal care that transcended species boundaries. The monitoring equipment registered a corresponding spike in both their heart rates, evidence of the profound connection between mother and offspring. Mike adjusted the environmental controls, carefully managing the temperature gradient to support the bear's recovery. Too much warmth too quickly could be as dangerous as the cold, their bodies needing time to readjust to normal conditions. His years of wildlife research guided these decisions, though never had he imagined applying this knowledge in such direct intervention. Storm and river began showing more coordinated movements, their stronger constitutions aiding their recovery. The siblings pressed closer together, instinctively seeking shared warmth. Emma's attention shifted between all three cubs, her protective behavior adapting to their changing conditions. The monitoring equipment tracked these interactions, recording data that would revolutionize understanding of bear family dynamics. The research station's backup generator maintained its steady rhythm, powering the vital systems that now meant the difference between life and death. Through the observation windows, Mike could see ice forming on the external sensors, evidence of the continuing temperature drop outside. The contrast between the controlled environment of the entry chamber and the lethal cold beyond grew more stark with each passing moment. Emma's breathing had grown more regular, her massive chest rising and falling with increasing strength. The thermal imaging showed her core temperature continuing to climb towards safer levels, though still dangerously low by normal standards. Her eyes remained alert, tracking every movement within the chamber while maintaining her protective watch. Over her cubs, the portable monitoring equipment registered the first clear signs of consciousness returning to Pine. The smallest cub's vital signs showed marked improvement, stronger heart rate, more regular breathing, rising core temperature. Each positive indicator represented hope against overwhelming odds, a testament to the resilience of life when given a chance to survive. Mike's attention shifted between his patients and his medical equipment, carefully balancing technical readings against visual observations. The bear's recovery challenged everything he knew about cold weather survival in wildlife. Their ability to recover from such extreme conditions would rewrite scientific understanding of ursine physiology. Storm and rivers movements grew more coordinated as their condition improved, their small bodies showing increasing signs of awareness. The siblings responded to their mother's gentle vocalizations, establishing a communication that spoke of family bonds stronger than the cold that had nearly claimed them. The monitoring equipment captured these interactions, recording data that would fascinate wildlife researchers for years to come. The wind changed direction again, its howl taking on a different note as it battered the research station. Through the observation windows, the swirling snow created endless patterns in the floodlight's glare. The storm's fury seemed to protest. This intervention in natural law, this bridging of the gap between wild and tame. Emma's attention never wavered as she monitored her cub's recovery, her maternal instincts guiding her response to their improving condition. The trust she continued to show in allowing human presence this close to her offspring represented something unprecedented in wildlife behavior. Each moment added to a growing body of evidence that would challenge conventional understanding of bear intelligence. Pine's increasing movements drew soft vocalizations of encouragement from Emma, her gentle rumbles carrying tones that needed no scientific interpretation to understand. The smallest cub responded with weak sounds of its own, establishing a dialogue that spoke of returning strength and awareness. The monitoring equipment tracked these interactions, recording data that revealed the complexity of bear family communications. The research station's environmental controls maintained the careful balance required for safe recovery. Mike adjusted the settings with practiced precision, each modification guided by the bear's improving condition. The electronic displays showed a steady progression toward normal vital signs, though the path to full recovery remained long and uncertain. Through the observation windows, other signs of life began to appear in the valley. The floodlights caught glimpses of wildlife drawn by the promise of warmth. Deer sheltering near the station's walls, foxes seeking protection from the wind, even a young moose cautiously approaching the perimeter. The unprecedented cold had forced new alliances, crossing boundaries that usually remained absolute. Emma's massive frame shifted slightly as she adjusted her position, her movements showing returning strength and coordination. The thermal blankets crackled with the motion, their metallic surfaces catching the harsh lighting. The trust she displayed in maintaining her calm demeanor spoke of reasoning that went beyond instinct, suggesting levels of comprehension that would fascinate wildlife researchers. The portable medical equipment continued recording the bear's vital signs, creating a detailed record of their remarkable recovery. Each measurement, each reading, contributed to a growing understanding of cold weather survival in wildlife. The data would challenge existing theories about bear physiology and behavior, opening new areas of scientific inquiry. Storm and rivers improvement accelerated as their stronger bodies responded to the emergency treatment. The siblings showed increasing awareness of their surroundings, their movements becoming more purposeful and coordinated. Emma's soft vocalizations guided their recovery, her maternal presence providing security in these unprecedented circumstances. The wind's assault on the research station continued unabated, its fury emphasized by occasional gusts that rattled the reinforced structure. Through the observation windows, the storm's power remained evident in the horizontal drive of snow and ice. The contrast between the controlled environment inside and the lethal conditions outside grew more pronounced with each passing moment. White Pine Valley Research Station transformed into an unlikely sanctuary as the Arctic night deepened. The entry chamber's carefully controlled environment hosted a scene unprecedented in wildlife research. a family of bears gradually returning from the brink of freezing, their recovery challenging conventional understanding of survival limits. Mike's monitoring equipment tracked every heartbeat, every breath, documenting a miracle of resilience and trust. Quiet sounds of recovery filled the chamber as Pine stirred beneath its thermal protection. The smallest cub's movements grew stronger with each passing hour, its tiny frame fighting back from near death. Emma's response to these signs of life revealed depths of maternal awareness that transcended scientific explanation. Her gentle nudges and soft vocalizations encouraged her offspring's return to consciousness, each interaction captured by the station's observation systems. The sophisticated medical equipment continued its vigil, recording data that would revolutionize understanding of bear physiology. Core temperatures slowly climbed towards sustainable levels, heart rates strengthened, and respiratory functions showed marked improvement. Mike adjusted the chemical warming packs with practiced care, maintaining the delicate balance between recovery and shock. Storm and River displayed increasing coordination as their bodies warmed, their natural resilience aiding their revival. The siblings' movements became more purposeful, responding to their mother's gentle guidance with growing awareness. Emma maintained her protective watch, her massive presence providing security in these strange circumstances. The monitoring systems captured every detail of their family dynamics, recording interactions that would fascinate researchers for years to come. Through the observation windows, the brutal storm continued its assault on the Montana wilderness. Ice crystals drove horizontally past the floodlights, creating ethereal patterns against the darkness. The station's external sensors registered another temperature drop, confirming that conditions outside remained lethal. The contrast between the chamber's warmth and the Arctic wasteland beyond emphasized the extraordinary nature of this night. Emma's own recovery progressed steadily, her massive frame showing signs of returning strength. The thermal imaging displayed encouraging changes in her core temperature, though still below normal ranges. Her eyes retained their remarkable alertness, tracking every movement within the chamber while maintaining constant awareness of her cub's condition. The trust she displayed in allowing human proximity defied conventional wildlife behavior patterns. The research station's sophisticated systems maintained their careful balance of temperature and humidity, creating optimal conditions for recovery. Mike's years of wildlife study guided his adjustments to the environmental controls, each modification supported by the steady stream of data from his monitoring equipment. The digital readings told a story of gradual triumph over devastating cold. Pine's increasing responsiveness drew soft sounds of encouragement from Emma, their communication revealing complex layers of family interaction. The smallest cubs vital. Signs showed steady improvement, each positive reading representing another step back from the precipice. The monitoring equipment captured these changes in detail, generating data that would challenge existing theories about cold weather survival. In young bears, Storm and River's recovery accelerated as their stronger constitutions responded to treatment. The siblings showed growing awareness of their surroundings, their movements becoming more coordinated and purposeful. Emma guided their revival with gentle vocalizations, her maternal presence providing stability in this unprecedented situation. The observation systems recorded every aspect of their interactions, documenting behavior that bridged the gap between wild and tame. The station's external cameras caught glimpses of other wildlife drawn to the promise of warmth. Deer sheltered. Near the walls, their own survival instincts overcome by desperate need. Foxes sought protection in the building's lee, while ravens huddled on nearby branches. The lethal cold had forced new alliances, crossing boundaries that usually remained inviolate. Emma's attention shifted between her cubs and the chamber's entrance, her protective instincts adapting to these strange circumstances. The trust she displayed in maintaining her calm demeanor, suggested levels of comprehension that went beyond instinct. Each moment added to a growing body of evidence that would challenge conventional understanding of bear intelligence. The portable medical devices continued their constant monitoring, feeding data to Mike's tablets and the station's main computer. Each measurement, each reading, contributed to a remarkable record of recovery against overwhelming odds. The information would provide invaluable insights into wildlife survival mechanisms, opening new areas of scientific inquiry. Through the reinforced windows, the storm's fury showed no signs of abating. The wind's howl penetrated even the station's substantial walls, its voice changing pitch as it found new angles of attack. Ice accumulated on external sensors, creating ghostly formations that caught and scattered the floodlight's glare. The contrast between sanctuary and storm grew more pronounced with each passing hour. Emma's massive frame adjusted position with increasing ease, her movements showing returning strength and coordination. The thermal blankets rustled with each shift, their metallic surfaces reflecting the chamber's harsh lighting. Her continued acceptance of human presence near her vulnerable cubs represented something unprecedented in wildlife behavior, a conscious choice that defied natural instinct. The sophisticated monitoring equipment registered subtle changes in the cubs' conditions, tracking their gradual return to normal physiology. Core temperatures stabilized, heart rates found stronger rhythms, and respiratory functions showed marked improvement. Each positive indicator represented another victory in their battle against the lethal cold. Pine's recovery continued to progress, the smallest cub showing increasing signs of awareness. Its movements became more coordinated, responding to Emma's gentle encouragement with growing strength. The monitoring systems captured every detail of their interaction, recording data that revealed the complexity of bear family dynamics. Storm and River displayed remarkable resilience as their conditions improved, their natural strength supporting rapid recovery. The siblings maintained close physical contact, sharing warmth and comfort as consciousness fully returned. Emma's soft vocalizations guided their revival, her presence providing security in these extraordinary circumstances. The research station's environmental controls maintained their careful balance, supporting the bear's gradual warming with sophisticated precision. Mike's expertise guided each adjustment, his understanding of wildlife physiology applied in ways never before attempted. The digital readouts confirmed the success of his interventions, showing steady progress toward normal vital signs. Through the observation windows, other evidence of the storm's impact became visible. Snow accumulated in deep drifts against the station's walls, while ice formations grew like crystal sculptures in the floodlight's glare. The brutal cold transformed familiar landmarks into alien shapes, creating a landscape more suited to Arctic wastes than Montana wilderness. Emma's attention remained sharp as she monitored her cub's recovery, her maternal instincts undiminished by their unusual circumstances. The trust she continued to display challenged existing theories about wildlife behavior, suggesting levels of reasoning far beyond conventional understanding. Each moment added to a growing body of evidence that would fascinate researchers for years to come. The portable medical equipment maintained its constant vigil, recording every aspect of this unprecedented event. The data streams told a story of remarkable resilience, of life persisting against overwhelming odds. Each measurement, each reading contributed to a deeper understanding of wildlife survival mechanisms. Pine's increasing mobility drew soft sounds of approval from Emma, their communication revealing complex layers of family interaction. The smallest cub's vital signs showed steady improvement, approaching normal ranges for the first time since their rescue. The monitoring systems captured these changes in detail, documenting a recovery that defied conventional expectations. Storm and River's revival continued to accelerate, their stronger constitutions supporting rapid improvement. The siblings showed growing awareness of their surroundings, their movements becoming more coordinated and purposeful. Emma guided their recovery with gentle vocalizations, her presence providing stability in these extraordinary circumstances. Midnight passed in White Pine Valley Research Station as an extraordinary scene continued to unfold. The entry chamber glowed with soft light, its atmosphere carefully regulated to support the remarkable recovery taking place within. Mike observed, through reinforced glass, as Emma tended to her cubs, her movements showing increasing strength and coordination. The sophisticated monitoring equipment tracked every aspect of their improvement, recording data that would challenge scientific understanding of wildlife resilience. The smallest cub, Pine, had progressed from barely detectable life signs to conscious movement. Its tiny frame, still wrapped in thermal protection, shifted with growing purpose. Emma's response to these changes revealed profound maternal awareness, her gentle encouragement guiding her offspring's return to full consciousness. The monitoring systems captured every nuance of their interaction, documenting behavior that transcended conventional wildlife studies. Storm and River displayed remarkable recovery rates, their stronger constitutions supporting rapid improvement. The siblings maintained close physical contact, sharing warmth and comfort as their awareness returned. Emma's soft vocalizations directed their movements, her presence providing security in these unprecedented circumstances. The observation equipment recorded every detail of their family dynamics, creating a valuable record of bear behavior under extraordinary conditions. Through the station's external sensors, the Arctic storm continued its relentless assault on the Montana wilderness. Ice formations grew like crystalline sculptures in the floodlight's glare, while wind-driven snow created ever-deeper drifts against the building's walls. The contrast between the chamber's controlled environment and the lethal conditions outside emphasized the remarkable nature of this night's events. Emma's own recovery progressed steadily, her massive frame showing increasing signs of returning strength. The thermal imaging displayed encouraging changes in her core temperature, though still below normal ranges. Her eyes retained their remarkable alertness, tracking every movement within the chamber while maintaining constant awareness of her cub's condition. The trust she displayed in allowing human proximity defied conventional wildlife behavior patterns. The sophisticated medical equipment maintained its constant monitoring, feeding data to Mike's tablets and the station's main computer. Each measurement, each reading, contributed to a growing understanding of cold weather survival in bears. The information would provide invaluable insights into wildlife physiology, opening new areas of scientific inquiry. The digital readouts told a story of gradual triumph over devastating cold. Pine's increasing responsiveness drew soft sounds of encouragement from Emma, their communication revealing complex layers of family interaction. The smallest cub's vital signs showed steady improvement, each positive reading representing another step back from the precipice. The monitoring equipment captured these changes in detail, generating data that would challenge existing theories about cold weather survival in young bears. The research station's environmental controls maintained their careful balance, supporting the bear's gradual warming with sophisticated precision. Mike's expertise guided each adjustment, his understanding of wildlife physiology applied in ways never before attempted. The digital readouts confirmed the success of his interventions, showing steady progress toward normal vital signs. Emma's attention shifted between her cubs and the chamber's entrance, her protective instincts adapting to these strange circumstances. The trust she displayed in maintaining her calm demeanor suggested levels of comprehension that went beyond instinct. Each moment added to a growing body of evidence that would challenge conventional understanding of bear intelligence. Storm and River's revival continued to accelerate, their natural resilience supporting rapid improvement. The siblings showed growing awareness of their surroundings, their movements becoming more coordinated and purposeful. Emma guided their recovery with gentle vocalizations, her presence providing stability in these extraordinary circumstances. The station's sophisticated systems maintained their careful balance of temperature and humidity, creating optimal conditions for recovery. Mike's years of wildlife study guided his adjustments to the environmental controls, each modification supported by the steady stream of data from his monitoring equipment. The digital readings told a story of gradual triumph over devastating cold. Through the reinforced windows, other evidence of the storm's impact became visible. Snow accumulated in deep drifts against the station's walls, while ice formations grew like crystal sculptures in the floodlight's glare. The brutal cold transformed familiar landmarks into alien shapes, creating a landscape more suited to Arctic wastes than Montana wilderness. Emma's massive frame adjusted position with increasing ease, her movements showing returning strength and coordination. The thermal blankets rustled with each shift, their metallic surfaces reflecting the chamber's harsh lighting. Her continued acceptance of human presence near her vulnerable cubs represented something unprecedented in wildlife behavior, a conscious choice that defied natural instinct. The portable medical devices continued their constant monitoring, feeding data to Mike's tablets and the station's main computer. Each measurement, each reading, contributed to a remarkable record of recovery against overwhelming odds. The information would provide invaluable insights into wildlife survival mechanisms, opening new areas of scientific inquiry. Pine's recovery continued to progress, the smallest cub showing increasing signs of awareness. Its movements became more coordinated, responding to Emma's gentle encouragement with growing strength. The monitoring systems captured every detail of their interaction, recording data that revealed the complexity of bear family dynamics. Through the observation windows, the storm's fury showed no signs of abating. The wind's howl penetrated even the station's substantial walls, its voice changing pitch as it found new angles of attack. Ice accumulated on external sensors, creating ghostly formations that caught and scattered the floodlight's glare. The contrast between sanctuary and storm grew more pronounced with each passing hour. Emma's attention remained sharp as she monitored her cub's recovery, her maternal instincts undiminished by their unusual circumstances. The trust she continued to display challenged existing theories about wildlife behavior, suggesting levels of reasoning far beyond conventional understanding. Each moment added to a growing body of evidence that would fascinate researchers for years to come. The portable medical equipment maintained its constant vigil, recording every aspect of this unprecedented event. The data streams told a story of remarkable resilience, of life persisting against overwhelming odds. Each measurement, each reading, contributed to a deeper understanding of wildlife survival mechanisms. Pine's increasing mobility drew soft sounds of approval from Emma, their communication revealing complex layers of family interaction. The smallest cub's vital signs showed steady improvement, approaching normal ranges for the first time since their rescue. The monitoring systems captured these changes in detail, documenting a recovery that defied conventional expectations. Dawn approached White Pine Valley with tentative fingers of light barely visible through the continuing storm. The research station's sophisticated monitoring systems tracked time's passage while maintaining their vigilant watch over the remarkable scene unfolding within. Mike observed through reinforced glass as his unprecedented patience showed increasing signs of recovery, their vital signs strengthening with each passing hour. The entry chamber had evolved into a carefully controlled rehabilitation space, its environment precisely regulated to support the bear's gradual return to normal body temperature. Emma maintained her position near the heating vents, her massive frame providing additional warmth and security for her cubs. The monitoring equipment continued recording every aspect of their recovery, generating data that would revolutionize understanding of wildlife survival capabilities. Pine demonstrated remarkable resilience, the smallest cub now moving with growing confidence beneath its thermal protection. Its tiny frame, so recently rigid with cold, showed increasing coordination and strength. Emma's response to these improvements revealed complex maternal behaviors, her gentle guidance encouraging each new achievement. The observation systems captured every nuance of their interaction, documenting a relationship that challenged conventional wildlife research. The station's external cameras revealed the storm's continuing impact on the surrounding wilderness. Ice formations created surreal sculptures across the landscape, while wind-driven snow reshaped familiar terrain into alien formations. The contrast between the chamber's protective warmth and the lethal conditions outside emphasized the extraordinary nature of this night's events. Storm and River displayed increasing activity as their recovery progressed, their natural strength supporting rapid improvement. The siblings explored their temporary sanctuary with growing curiosity, though always remaining within Emma's protective reach. Their movements showed returning coordination and purpose, each new activity documented by the sophisticated monitoring systems. Mike's medical equipment maintained its constant vigil, recording vital signs that approached normal ranges for the first time since rescue. The data streams told a story of remarkable resilience, documenting recovery rates that defied conventional understanding. Each measurement contributed to a growing body of knowledge about wildlife survival mechanisms under extreme conditions. Emma's own recovery continued steadily, her massive frame showing increasing signs of returning strength. The thermal imaging displayed encouraging changes in her core temperature, though still requiring careful monitoring. Her eyes retained their remarkable alertness, tracking every movement within the chamber while maintaining constant awareness of her cub's condition. The research station's environmental controls maintained their delicate balance, supporting the bear's gradual warming with sophisticated precision. Mike's expertise guided each adjustment, his understanding of wildlife physiology applied in unprecedented ways. The digital readouts confirmed the success of his interventions, showing steady progress toward normal, vital signs. Through the observation windows, other wildlife continued seeking shelter near the station's walls. Deer huddled against the building's lee side, while foxes found protection in the deep snow drifts. The brutal cold had forced new alliances, creating temporary truces between species that normally maintained careful distance. Pine's increasing mobility drew soft sounds of approval from Emma, their communication revealing complex layers of family interaction. The smallest cub's vital signs showed remarkable improvement, approaching normal ranges for the first time. Since their rescue, the monitoring systems captured these changes in detail, documenting a recovery that defied conventional expectations. The station's sophisticated systems maintained their careful balance of temperature and humidity, creating optimal conditions for recovery. Mike's years of wildlife study guided his adjustments to the environmental controls, each modification supported by the steady stream of data from his monitoring equipment. The digital readings told a story of gradual triumph over devastating cold. Emma's massive frame adjusted position with increasing ease, her movements showing returning strength and coordination. The thermal blankets rustled with each shift, their metallic surfaces reflecting the chamber's harsh lighting. Her continued acceptance of human presence near her vulnerable cubs represented something unprecedented in wildlife behavior, a conscious choice that defied natural instinct. Storm and River's recovery accelerated as their stronger constitutions responded to treatment. The siblings showed growing awareness of their surroundings, their movements becoming more coordinated and purposeful. Emma guided their revival with gentle vocalizations, her presence providing stability in this unprecedented situation. The station's external sensors captured the storm's unrelenting assault on the Montana wilderness. Ice crystals drove horizontally past the floodlights, creating ethereal patterns against the darkness. The brutal cold transformed familiar landmarks into alien shapes, while wind-driven snow continued reshaping the landscape. Emma's attention remained sharp as she monitored her cub's recovery, her maternal instincts undiminished by their unusual circumstances. The trust she continued to display challenged existing theories about wildlife behavior, suggesting levels of reasoning far beyond conventional understanding. Each moment added to a growing body of evidence that would fascinate researchers for years to come. Through the reinforced windows, the storm's fury showed no signs of abating. The wind's howl penetrated even the station's substantial walls, its voice changing pitch as it found new angles of attack. Ice accumulated on external sensors, creating ghostly formations that caught and scattered the floodlight's glare. Pines. Recovery continued to progress, the smallest cub showing increasing signs of awareness. Its movements became more coordinated, responding to Emma's gentle encouragement with growing strength. The monitoring systems captured every detail of their interaction, recording data that revealed the complexity of bear family dynamics. The sophisticated medical equipment maintained its constant monitoring, feeding data to Mike's tablets and the station's main computer. Each measurement, each reading, contributed to a remarkable record of recovery against overwhelming odds. The information would provide invaluable insights into wildlife survival mechanisms, opening new areas of scientific inquiry. Emma's protective watch never wavered as she tended to her cubs, her presence providing security in these strange circumstances. The trust she displayed in maintaining her calm demeanor suggested levels of comprehension that went beyond instinct. Each moment added to a growing understanding of bear intelligence and adaptability. The research station's backup generator maintained its steady rhythm, ensuring constant power to the vital systems supporting recovery. Through the observation windows, the contrast between sanctuary and storm grew more pronounced with each passing hour. The brutal cold outside emphasized the remarkable nature of the scene unfolding within. First light touched White Pine Valley with gentle fingers, transforming the brutal landscape into something almost magical. The research station's sophisticated monitoring systems tracked the gradual warming as the Arctic front finally began to loosen its grip. Through reinforced windows, Mike observed the first hints of color returning to the snow-covered wilderness, nature's signal that survival had been possible through the darkest hours. Emma stirred at the changing light, her massive frame now moving with renewed strength and purpose. The monitoring equipment confirmed her remarkable recovery, displaying vital signs that approached normal ranges. Her cubs, once so close to death, showed increasing vitality beneath their thermal protection. Pine, the smallest, had transformed from a motionless bundle of ice into an active, curious cub whose movements drew soft sounds of approval from its watchful mother. The sophisticated medical equipment continued recording every aspect of this unprecedented event, documenting a recovery that would challenge scientific understanding of wildlife resilience. Each measurement told part of a story that bridged the gap between human and wild, creating data that would fascinate researchers for generations to come. The digital readouts confirmed what observations suggested. The bear family had defied overwhelming odds through a combination of human intervention and natural strength. Storm and River explored their temporary sanctuary with growing confidence, their movements showing returning coordination and purpose. The siblings maintained close proximity to Emma, responding to her gentle vocalizations with increasing awareness. Their recovery had progressed beyond all expectations, proving the remarkable adaptability of young wildlife when given a chance to survive. The research station's environmental controls maintained their careful balance, though nature itself now supported recovery as external temperatures gradually rose. Through the observation windows, Mike watched as the first rays of sunlight caught ice crystals in the air, creating rainbow refractions that danced across the snow-covered landscape. The brutal storm that had forced this extraordinary interaction began showing signs of retreating. Emma's attention shifted between her cubs and the lightening sky visible through the station's windows. Her dark eyes held awareness that went beyond animal instinct, suggesting understanding of changing circumstances. The trust she had shown throughout this remarkable night represented something unprecedented in wildlife behavior, a conscious choice that defied conventional understanding. Of bear intelligence, Pine's movements grew more coordinated with each passing hour, the smallest cub now showing playful interest in its surroundings. The monitoring systems tracked every aspect of its remarkable recovery, recording data that would provide invaluable insights into wildlife survival mechanisms. Emma's response to her cub's increasing activity revealed complex layers of maternal behavior, her gentle guidance encouraging each new achievement. The station's sophisticated systems began adjusting to the changing external conditions, preparing for the inevitable moment when wild and human worlds would need to separate again. Mike's expertise guided these preparations, his understanding of wildlife behavior suggesting the appropriate timing for this transition. The digital readouts confirmed that the bear family's recovery had reached a point where return to their natural habitat became possible. Through the reinforced windows, other wildlife showed signs of emerging from the storm's grip. Deer ventured from their shelter near the station's walls, while ravens returned to their observation posts in nearby trees. The brutal cold that had forced unprecedented alliances began releasing its hold on White Pine Valley, allowing natural boundaries to reassert themselves. Emma's massive frame shifted with increasing purpose, her movements suggesting awareness of approaching change. The thermal blankets that had provided crucial protection through the darkest hours now seemed less necessary as her natural coat regained its insulating properties. Her continued calm acceptance of human proximity spoke of reasoning that transcended instinct, an understanding that help had been vital for survival. Storm and River responded to their mother's changing energy, their own movements becoming more focused and deliberate. The siblings maintained their close physical connection while showing increasing interest in the world beyond their temporary sanctuary. The monitoring equipment tracked these behavioral changes, recording data that would contribute to understanding of bear family dynamics under extraordinary circumstances. The research station's entry chamber, which had served as an unprecedented wildlife hospital, began its gradual return to normal operations. Mike's careful adjustments to the environmental controls supported this transition, maintaining comfortable conditions while allowing the bears to readjust to natural temperatures. The sophisticated systems that had helped save 4 lives prepared for their departure. Emma's attention focused increasingly on the strengthening daylight visible through the station's windows. Her natural instincts, temporarily suspended in the face of desperate need, began reasserting themselves as survival became certain. The trust she had shown throughout this remarkable night remained evident in her calm demeanor, though now tempered With growing awareness of need for return to wild existence, Queen's recovery had progressed beyond all expectations, the smallest cub now showing strength and coordination that seemed impossible mere hours before. Its movements drew continuing attention from Emma, whose soft vocalizations carried tones of approval and encouragement. The monitoring systems captured these interactions, documenting behavior that would fascinate wildlife researchers for years to come. The sophisticated medical equipment recorded final readings as the bear family prepared for departure, creating a complete record of their remarkable recovery. Each measurement contributed to understanding of wildlife's survival capabilities, providing insights that would benefit future conservation efforts. The digital data told a story of triumph against overwhelming odds, a testament to the resilience of life when given opportunity to persevere. Through the observation windows, White Pine Valley revealed itself anew in strengthening sunlight. Ice formations that had threatened life now created spectacular displays as light caught their crystalline surfaces. The wilderness that had become so hostile during the storm's fury began showing signs of returning to its natural rhythms, offering familiar territory for its wild inhabitants. Emma's movement toward the station's outer door carried purpose and dignity, her massive frame now fully capable of supporting independent movement. Her cubs followed her lead with increasing confidence, though staying within the protective radius of her presence. The trust she had shown throughout their extraordinary refuge transformed into quiet acknowledgement as she prepared to lead her family back to their natural environment. The research station's systems began final adjustments as the bear family prepared for departure. Mike's expertise guided these preparations, his understanding of wildlife behavior suggesting the appropriate approach to this crucial transition. The sophisticated monitoring equipment recorded these last moments, capturing data that would contribute to understanding of bear intelligence and adaptability. Through the reinforced windows, other signs of returning normal activity became visible. In the valley, wildlife emerged from storm shelters, reclaiming familiar territories as temperatures rose to sustainable levels. The brutal cold that had forced unprecedented choices began releasing its grip, allowing natural boundaries to re-establish themselves. Emma paused at the threshold between sanctuary and wilderness, her dark eyes meeting Mike's in final acknowledgement of their extraordinary shared experience. The trust she had shown in allowing human intervention to save her family spoke of intelligence beyond conventional understanding of wildlife behavior. Her cubs gathered close, responding to subtle cues that suggested imminent return to their natural world. The sophisticated monitoring systems recorded final measurements as the bear family prepared to depart, documenting vital signs that confirmed their remarkable recovery. Each reading contributed to a growing body of knowledge about wildlife resilience, providing insights that would benefit future conservation efforts. The digital data told a story of survival against overwhelming odds, a testament to the potential for understanding between species. First steps into restored wilderness carried increasing confidence as Emma led her family away from temporary sanctuary. The monitoring equipment tracked their movement until distance made readings impossible, recording data until the last possible moment. Through sophisticated surveillance systems, Mike observed their departure, witnessing the gradual transformation from dependent patients back to wild creatures. Watch more incredible wildlife stories that showcase the extraordinary bonds between humans and animals. From heartwarming rescues to unexpected friendships, our collection of remarkable tales continues to inspire and amaze. Up next, 2 more unforgettable stories await your discovery. Click now to experience more moments that remind us of the incredible connections possible in our natural world.